All praises to YAHAWASHI, double honor to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. SHALAWAM to all the sincere AHCHYAM, laboring in true sincerity. Today, it's kind of a continuation of what I was talking about earlier in the video I did. Ww3 Is Brewing, because I got a little bit more information about the as far as what I was saying about Russia, China, North Korea. So I'm gonna just read the scripture once more. St. Matthew chapter 24 verse 6. Ye shall hear wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. All right, so this is from the peoplesvoice.org. It's an alternative media site. And it starts off for Salaki, hold up. All right, it says, for almost 2 decades, the U.S. pursued a list of enemy countries to confront, attack, weaken, or overthrow. This imperial quest to overthrow enemy countries operated as various levels of intensity depending on two considerations: the level of priority and the degree of vulnerability for a regime change operation. The criteria for determining an enemy country and its place on the list of priority targets in the U.S. quest for greater global dominance, as well as its vulnerability to a successful regime change, will be focused on this essay. We will conclude by discussing the realistic perspectives of future imperial options. So, prioritizing U.S. adversaries. Imperial strategies consider military, economic, and political criteria in identifying high priority adversaries. It said the following are high on the U.S. enemy list, and these are basically, for the most part, these are the nations. At least the first 1, 2, 3, and then 5. So it says Russia, because of its military power, is a nuclear counterweight to the U.S. global domination. It said it has a huge, well-equipped armed force with a European, Asian, and Middle East presence. It says its global oil and gas resources shielded from U.S. economic blackmail, and its growing geopolitical alliance limit U.S. exploitation. So going on, it says it has down here China, which it says China, because of its global economic power and the growing scope of its trade, investments, and technological network. China's growing defensive military capability, particularly with regard to protecting its interests in the South China Sea, served to counter U.S. domination in Asia. It says North Korea, because of its nuclear and ballistic missile capability, its fierce independent foreign policies, and its strategic geopolitical location, is seen as a threat to U.S. military bases in Asia and Washington's regional allies and proxies. Venezuela, because of its oil resources and socio-political policies, changing the U.S.-centered neoliberal model in Latin America. So then it says, goes on to say Iran, because of its oil resources, political independence, and geopolitical alliance in the Middle East, change U.S., Israel, and Saudi Arabia domination of the region and present an independent alternative. Syria is the next country on the list. On this list, it says, because of its strategic position in the Middle East, its secular nationalist ruling party, and its alliance with Iran, Palestine, Iraq, and Russia, is a counterweight to U.S.-Israeli plan to balkanize the Middle East into warring ethno-tribal states. And then it goes on to say U.S. Mid-level adversaries, which I'm going to just name them: Cuba, Lebanon, Yemen. Bolivia, low-level adversaries, Bolivia, Nicaragua. So it says U.S. hostility to high-priority adversaries is expressed through economic sanctions, military encirclement, provocations, and intense propaganda wars towards North Korea, Russia, Venezuela, Iran, and Syria because of China's powerful global economic because of China's powerful global market linkages, the U.S. has applied few sanctions. Instead, the U.S. relies on military encirclement, separatist provocations, and intense hostile propaganda when dealing with China. It says priority adversaries, low level, vulnerable, and unreal expectations. It says with the exception of Venezuela, Washington's high priority targets have limited strategic vulnerabilities. Venezuela is the most vulnerable because of its high dependence on oil revenues, with its major refineries located in the U.S. and its high levels of indebtedness verging on default. In addition, there are the domestic opposition groups, all acting as U.S. clients, and Caracas' growing isolation within Latin America due to orchestrated hostilities by important U.S. clients, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, and Mexico. It says Iran is far less vulnerable. It is a strong strategic regional military power linked to neighboring countries and similar religious nationalist movements. Despite its dependence on oil exports, Iran has developed alternative markets like China, free from the U.S. blackmail, and is relatively safe from U.S. and European Union initiated creditor attacks. It says North Korea, despite the crippling economic sanctions imposed on its regime and civilian population, has the bomb as a deterrent to a U.S. military attack and has shown no reluctance to defend itself. Unlike Venezuela, neither Iran nor North Korea faces significant internal attacks from U.S. funded or armed domestic opposition. It says Russia has full military capability, nuclear weapons, intercontinental ballistic missiles, and a huge, well-trained armed force to deter any direct U.S. military threat. Moscow is politically vulnerable to U.S.-backed propaganda. Opposition political parties and Western-funded NGOs, Russian oligarch billionaires like linked to London and Wall Street exercise some pressure against independent economic initiatives. It says to a limited degree, U.S. sanctions exploited Russia's earlier dependence on Western markets, but since the imposition of draconian sanctions by the Obama regime, Moscow has effectively countered Washington's offensive by diversifying its markets to Asia and strengthening domestic self-reliance in its agriculture, industry, and high technology. It says China has a world-class economy and is on the course to becoming the world's economic leader. Feeble threats to sanction China have merely exposed Washington's weakness rather than intimidating Beijing. China has countered U.S. military provocations and threats by expanding its economic market power, increasing its strategic military capability, and shedding dependence on the dollar. So it says Washington's high priority targets are not vulnerable to frontal attack. They retain or are increasing their domestic cohesion and economic networks while upgrading their military capacity to impose completely unacceptable costs on the U.S. For any direct assault. It says as a result, the U.S. leaders are forced to rely on incremental, peripheral, and proxy attacks with limited results against its high priority adversaries. Washington will tighten sanctions on North Korea and Venezuela with dubious prospects of success in the former and possible Pyrrhic victory in the case of Caracas, Iran and Russia can easily overcome proxy interventions. U.S. allies like Saudi Arabia and Israel can badger, uh, propagandize and rail the Persians, but their fear that an out and out war against Iran could quickly destroy Riyadh and Tel Aviv forces them to work in tandem to introduce the corrupt U.S. political establishment to push for war over the objections and war-weary U.S. military and population. Saudi Arabia and Israel can bomb and starve the populations of Yemen and Gaza, which lack any capability to reply in kind. But Tehran is another matter. Let me see. I mean, that's pretty much it. So it's basically that article was basically, further illustrating or going in depth, explaining how, the main biggest allies against of the United States are basically Russia, Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China, which you could see, if you turn on the news or whatever, you could see what this is basically saying, how all this stuff plays out. Yes, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. So with that, I hope this is edifying. I want to give all praises to YAHAWAH, YAHAWASHI, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone, and Shalawam to all the sincere AHCHYAM. Shalawam.